one of those days.
Yeah, it is. At this point, I'd like to think that everybody knows how 2023 went as a year in general, right? So on the count of three, say it with me. Why don't you? 1, 2, 3. 2023 was a great year for games, but a bad year for the industry. A bad year for the people. A lot of really great games came out in 2023. A lot of games that brought us as players a lot of joy. There was a lot of really unique experiences, and it felt like a year where creativity was highlighted. We saw things like Sea of Stars, Alan Wake 2, Baldur's Gate 3, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, Pikmin 4, for goodness sake. All those games came out and were pretty great. But people throughout the year continuously lost their jobs. And towards the end of the year, it was sounding like 2024 was going to be just as brutal, if not worse. And as a matter of fact, the video game industry has already had quite a few layoffs this year, and this week it just got worse. Microsoft just axed 1,900, that's 1,900 jobs from their games division. Our colleagues over at Push Square reported on this today, stating that jobs across ZeniMax, Activision, Bethesda, Blizzard, and more jobs are going to be affected. Phil Spencer, the head of Xbox, in a memo shared that there are 22,000 people working on the Xbox brand, the Xbox games division. Now let's do some quick math. That's almost 10% of jobs just axed, seemingly out of nowhere. And this just keeps happening. Now, according to a report from the Game Developers Conference, GDC, they held a poll where 35% of developers said that they were impacted by layoffs last year, which either means that they were laid off themselves or they were working on a team or knew people that were laid off. And you might think to yourself, well, that number is unfair because not everybody in that number was laid off. Well, if Alex and Felix were let go from this job, I would be impacted by that. My job would be a lot harder if it was just me here trying to do all of this by myself, which is why I give so much credit to Craig and Aaron over at Pure Xbox and Push Square. Of course, they have their teams behind them, helping them, and same with me. I wouldn't be able to do what I do without Gavin and Alana and Jim and Ollie and everybody that works on our team, all of the reviewers that we have, all of our writers. I wanted to sit down here and try to be positive and have some different kind of outlook to look at all of this, some answers, some options as to what the industry can do to change. But I don't know, if it was that easy, then somebody else probably would have done it by now. I do still have a few things that I want to talk about. One of which is I want to consider why this is happening. Over on Twitter, I went and retweeted the Pure Xbox article talking about the Xbox layoffs. I was trying to ask people why they thought this was happening. One thought that I had was maybe the industry is growing too fast. Now, I pulled a few examples here. If we look back at something like Donkey Kong Country that was developed on the Super Nintendo, this came out in 1994. The development team was less than 50 people. According to the credits of the game, this includes testers at Nintendo. This even includes Dan Osen, who created the manual for the game. And now if we flash forward to 2019, Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair, which was developed by Playtonic, which is a lot of the same people that worked on Donkey Kong Country back in the day, you have 154 people. And this data, by the way, is all pulled from mobygames.com, which is a great source for finding information on developers. And you can see that the development team themselves is roughly, at Playtonic, was roughly around 30 people. And then Team 17, who published the game, created the physical version of the game. They also had their own QA testers there, accessibility managers. There's a lot of different roles. And if you look at that number, that's 154 people. That's 3 times as many as the original Donkey Kong Country had. Now, I'm not trying to say that the industry doesn't need these roles, but is it possible that it just costs more money and takes more people to make games than it used to? Because look at something like Celeste. Now, I realize I'm talking about all of the same kind of games here, and maybe that's unfair to compare them all, but Celeste was credited with 80 developers. Now, that includes people that helped port the game, helped translate it, social media. You have community managers in there, contributors, play testers. There's quite a lengthy list of developers there. But if you look, Extremely OK Games, the developers of Celeste, actually just went and tweeted the other day. They shared a picture of their studio and some of their developers working. You can see Maddie and Noelle at their desks there. And you can see the office, there aren't a lot of people working in an office like this. And they're working on their next game, Earthblade, now. But it seems like they're being very cautious and humble and careful. But I also want to consider something like Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. If you look at the credits for that, I'm not sure if all of these people even worked on the game. You do have a lot of duplicate names in here on this list, but 3,000 people, 3,000 roles at least, 3,000 jobs were needed in order to create Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. You'll see things like who played the piano and the cello and the violin and the tuba, and some of these people are the same. So these numbers aren't to be trusted 100%. You'd really have to have someone go through and count up all the different roles and how many people, fill in different shoes and things like that. But I think what I'm trying to get at is the industry trying to grow too fast. Are some of these companies taking on roles that they can't support for years and years? We just went and recently visited Platonic Games. We have a video all about that on the channel, and they've been a studio for about 8 years now, I believe. And they said that they now employ, I think it was around 55 people there. And while, yes, they are working on another game and we haven't seen anything of that, and we still don't know when we're going to, it seems like they're trying to work within their means. And I don't know this for certain, of course, but I wonder if some of these CEOs of game companies or investors dump a bunch of money into these studios because they see it as a cash grab. They see the next Assassin's Creed game as a cash grab, or the next Fortnite season, or the next Apex Legends expansion season. That's not even, they don't do expansions for Apex. Who am I kidding? I wonder if some developers, some studios, certain people in those studios are losing sight of the point of all of this. Video games were developed to give people an escape, to allow people to express themselves, to allow us to have fun with our friends and family, allow us to be competitive and try to reach for high scores, to see a story and help you experience something different. But last year at the Game Awards, which I wrote a whole piece about this on Nintendo Life, and I know a lot of you already know this, Jeff Keighley and his team didn't make mention that I remember at all about all of the layoffs that 2023 experienced. And with all of these jobs that have just been let go on Microsoft, it's shaping up to be a worse year. Unfortunately, I could see in 2024 or 2025, a video game gets nominated or even accepts an award for Game of the Year, and then the developers that made that game might not even work at their studio anymore because of layoffs. As technology advances and games get bigger and better, there are more things to consider. The industry has always had weird video game pre-order bonuses and commercials and magazine tie-ins and cereal crossovers and things like that. Like breakfast food cereal crossovers. We've always had weird stuff like that, but it feels like there are so many more moving parts now, and the industry has never been always that kind. You take a look at things like Shantae. The original Shantae came out on Game Boy Color towards the end of the console's life, and it sold incredibly poorly because the Game Boy Advance, I believe, was out at that point. And so when it came time to pitching Shantae 2, publishers looked at the sales of Shantae 1 and said, no thanks. So it's not like the industry has always been this perfect thing, but I just wonder if we're growing too fast. A lot of you probably remember this, but Satoru Iwata, during the days of the Wii U, ended up taking a massive pay cut because the Nintendo just wasn't doing financially as well. So why haven't we seen something like that from Phil Spencer or somebody else in the industry, or one of these companies that is facing these layoffs? Is Phil Spencer worried that we'd laugh and point? Does Phil have a ton of houses that he needs to pay for? Does he have too many cars? What kind of life do you live, Phil? Maybe actually Phil doesn't make a lot of money. I don't know this. But the ship seems to be broken. The video game industry vessel is not healthy right now. It's hurting incredibly bad. And I guess I'm just making this video because I want to do something, And I don't know what to do. Maybe in the future, we'll see more smaller teams make some great stuff. Not every game has to be a AAA masterpiece like Baldur's Gate 3. Another Code Recollection. Let's take that for example. Even though I've not finished the game, I decided to watch the credits today to try to find some data for this video. And it looks like over 200, 300 people still worked in that game. There are a lot of designers, a lot of writers, voice actors. There are so many different roles that were needed to make that game a reality. And even though that game had a lot of things that bummed me out, that it's not a perfect game by any means, I'm still glad that it existed. And maybe we just need to come together as people and come to a point where we can say, hey, It's all right. You know what? Sea of Stars, for example. The story, to me, fell flat in a few different areas, but there are so many other great moments in that game that it easily became one of my favorite games of 2023. It's not perfect, but no game has to be. And maybe that's something that so many of these big companies are fighting so hard. Not every game needs to make all of the profit. If you're paying your employees and you get to go home to a nice place and you get to go to sleep and be with your friends and family and you still get to make something fun, is that enough? Is that enough? On the topic of money, I think that is one piece of advice that I can give for you as the consumer, as the fan of video games. Try to vote with your wallet. If you're against AI practices, AI roles that might be cutting jobs for other people, maybe try to not support games that use AI. I mean, sure, I'll try to give you advice on which games you should or shouldn't buy based on how fun they are, but you can do whatever you think is best with your own wallet, and you should. I also wanted to look at the sales data for games from back in the day versus now. So if you take a look at something like Super Mario Bros. 3, Wikipedia claims that Super Mario Bros. 3 was the third best-selling NES game, selling more than 17 million copies. Now, if you take a look at Nintendo's sales data on their Japanese website, we can see that 57 million copies of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on Nintendo Switch have been sold. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate sold 32 million units. Breath of the Wild sold 31 million units. And that's the 5th best-selling game. So the games industry as a whole is much larger than it was in the days of the NES and the Super Nintendo. But for some reason, there are companies out there that are forgetting to take care of the people that actually make these games, the people that come up with the wacky and weird ideas, the ideas that don't work, that they shelve and try to come back to later, the ideas that they have to workshop and turn into something fun for us to enjoy. Today, the industry lost a lot of good people, and I want to say thank you to them. Thank you for everything you put into this industry of ours that we all love so much. I'm sorry that so many people have failed you, and I hope you find your footing. And I know a lot of you watching this feel that too. So in moments like this, talk with your wallet, speak up online. If you have a friend that lost a job in the industry and they make a tweet or something saying, they're looking for work, retweet it, send them job postings if they still need a job, try to help them the best you can. Because I can say that without video games, I would be a much uglier, sadder, grumpier person in this world. I think video games give me something to hope for, and they've taught me a lot of things. And I know that a lot of you feel the same. So I hope it never goes away. Thank you all so much for coming to my little TED Talk here about the current state of the video games industry. Let me know in the comments down below how you feel about all of this. Let us know what you think is going on, or if you think there's something that we can do to help. At this point, one thing I always hope whenever we make a video from the heart is that it will touch someone, or the right person will see it and a change can happen. Something will spark in their head. And I mean, that's the dream, right? Is whenever you have conflict and you just want things to be better, it's good to talk about it. So that's what I'm doing here, and I hope that you also find a way to do that too. I'm Zion from Nintendo Life. Stay safe out there, and we will see you all next time.